the part of your brain that embeds things into your body and like really puts them deep into your subconscious where you can use them like you use the alphabet without even thinking about it, is also the part of your brain that doesn't really know how to put things into words very well. And so sometimes you have to think about, okay, am I going to focus so much on putting this into words, or am I going to let the words dissolve and the meaning just flow into me? One thing that I've been thinking about quite a lot lately is the mind-body war, you could almost say. Someone in my book club was mentioning that when you set the mind and the body as two separate things, they automatically go to war with each other, and the mind almost always wins. And so I found that that's the environment that, as a 21st century human, I grew up in, was the victory lap of the mind over the body. And so what ends up happening is, as you go out of childhood and into a more academic setting, you feel the tension between the mind and the body, which you didn't feel when you were younger. So, for instance, when you're younger and you're learning to ride a bike, you don't think about trying to memorize everything absolutely perfectly. You work on getting the feel of it in your body, and then somehow it really never leaves you. Then you get into grade school, and then you begin to have tests for everything. You try to make learning entirely conscious, because when you are tested, they can quantify what is in your conscious mind. So you end up reciting things, quantifying things. When I go to read with this sort of mindset, I end up trying to memorize absolutely everything, because I feel like I have to control the information that is in front of me. And if I miss something, then when I really need something witty to say during this book club, I'm not going to have anything because I didn't memorize it and it's not fully in my conscious mind. And what am I going to do? This has been my reading life for a long time, and maybe I'm not the only one, because this is the way we're trained to read. I'm reading The City of God by Augustine right now, which is a really dense book, and it's 1,000 pages of really dense writing. And when I was reading the introduction, I decided to do something absolutely radical, and I said, as I was reading all of these cool facts about the Roman Empire crumbling during the time of Augustine, I said, you know what, if I forget this information, it's okay. If I think it's really cool when I'm reading it, and I'm like, that's a really fascinating fact, I don't have to put a sticky tab on it. I can let it just, like, dissolve into my body and not, like, have to have it where I can recite it perfectly at any given moment. It was the most fun reading experience because I wasn't trying to control the information, but at the same time, I was still learning. So I can't necessarily recite to you all the facts that I read in the introduction to Augustine. Like, I can't tell you who was the emperor during that time. I can't tell you what the war was called where the emperor killed other emperor, as they always do. But I have the overall... I use the word impression all the time, so I'm going to get a different word. It's going to be great. The ambiance of what was happening during that time, or the mood of the time during when Augustine was writing. I know the empire was crumbling. I know there was persecution going on around that time. So I understand that this is the setting that Augustine is writing in. And so when I read, I'm not going to go through my head and say, okay, self, what are the Donatists? Who were all the names of the Donatists that I read about in the introduction? And what does it have to do with particularly what Augustine is talking about right now? I just have the overall impression of what happened and the feeling of what it would have been like during that time, and that's enough to give me enough of an ambiance to place this information in its context. I lost my train of thought again. A crumbling empire. When you're watching a movie, you get the kind of the same feel. You get immersed into the atmosphere of the movie, and you're not sitting there thinking about the names of all the characters and, oh, who's that background character, what plot's going on right now. It's just there, and you just you feel it. It's not a conscious thing that you're sitting here trying to conjure up out of your brain and memorize and put into bullet points. You're immersed in it, and I want to call that like knowledge being dissolved into your body. Like, it's not just this conscious thing that you can recite, but you just feel it. It's like you're riding a bike when you're watching a movie. And if you've ever had to watch a movie for an assignment, it's so miserable. It's terrible. Like, because now I can't just sit and enjoy the movie. I have this constant fear of, am I going to forget what is happening right now in this random scene near a tree that's not going to come up in any other time? So being free from that when I was reading Augustine was a lot of fun. And yeah, so that's kind of my thesis right now. It's very jumbly, but that forgetting is half the fun of learning. Like, allow yourself to forget things. You go through all these YouTube videos about how to remember everything you read. It's like, it's not possible, and why would you care to? That's my thought on it. And maybe I'm just being radical and annoying, but for me, I don't care about remembering things. I care about feeling things. I care about being immersed in things. And when I allow myself to experience the musicality of what I am partaking in, whether it's a movie or a book, then the train of thought holds everything together. And if I wanted to go back and, like, for some reason I felt like I needed to memorize something, I have the overarching narrative that will now place all these facts in a context. I have sheet music over here. I'll use it. So, when you're trying to memorize individual facts, what ends up happening is you're just isolating, like, this musical phrase. And you want to be able to picture it perfectly in your head and be able to have a 4K clarity of this little piece in your head. But you cannot make beautiful piece of music out of just this. That's not going to do anything. What creates a beautiful piece of music is the ebb and flow. It's where the music goes from being soft to being loud, how the notes flow into each other, the different musical phrasing, the way that if you're in an orchestra, the violin like comes in and in the middle of the piano and just adds to the intensity. I'm so ignorant of orchestras, it's not even funny. I shouldn't use a different analogy, but anyway, it's just this dynamic dance, and that's why I think people like Jordan Peterson always talk about how music is the most accurate unveiling of the fabric of reality. It doesn't just take individual facts and isolate them, but everything is unified. It's why Plato talked about the music of the spheres and not the bullet points of the spheres. There's a reason. Like, imagine how much you could ruin Plato by replacing music with bullet points. And I think this is really a lesson for life in general. I think in our society, we're so afraid of forgetting things because we feel like we're not going to be smart, or we're going to miss something on a test or we're not going to have the perfect witty thing to say if we don't remember the names of everybody and everything. But let me tell you, it doesn't matter how much you intentionally try to remember something, the forgetting curve is still a thing, and you're probably going to forget it anyway. So if you just like let go of the need to put everything into a perfectly conscious dissertation, you're allowed to dance to the music of what you're reading. And I think it gets closer to the heart of what the authors are wanting you to do. With War and Peace, it's not about memorizing the 500 characters that Tolstoy talks about. It's really, most of those characters are there just to make it feel like an epic, and to add, again, that ambiance. And even Tolstoy himself, there's this one I think it's a necklace in War and Peace, and in one part of the book he calls it gold, and then in another part he calls it silver. And so then if you look at the footnotes, the editors are like, well, he must have forgotten that it was gold in the first half of the book, and now he's changing it to a silver necklace? Like, what is he doing? It's like, you know, I think we're gonna be okay. I actually love the fact that he forgot what metal the necklace was made out of, because it makes him human. And it's kind of funny, and let's just appreciate the fact that someone who remembered all these things also knew how to eloquently forget things. Because that's what humaning is. It's about the inhale and the exhale. It's about remembering things, but also knowing when to let them go to make room for things that are actually more meaningful and important. And it's also about trusting your brain. Because if you feel that something is important and it really resonates with you in a book, you're not going to have to force yourself to remember it. You know, that doesn't mean like don't take notes, because because I have all of these notes that I love to take, but don't take too many notes. Like, sometimes put the pen down and just read a book and allow the musicality of things to take more precedence over everything being absolutely conscious and your ability to recite things. Because the part of your brain that embeds things into your body and like really puts them deep into your subconscious, where you can use them like you use the alphabet without even thinking about it, is also the part of your brain that doesn't really know how to put things into words very well. And so sometimes you have to think about, okay, am I going to focus so much on putting this into words, or am I going to let the words dissolve and the meaning just flow into me? This sounds like weirdly mystical, and maybe that's because I was reading Rumi's poetry yesterday for like an hour. All this to say, it's okay to forget things. Forgetting things is just the opposite side, the second half of remembering things. And don't be afraid of letting things just move into your subconscious, because that's where music is made. That's where you learn to ride a bike and you never forget how to. It's a really beautiful part of our brain that is very mysterious, and maybe we should let it be mysterious and allow ourselves to dive into the ambiance and the musicality of everything around us. I don't know where to land this plane, but the only other important thing I have to say is that I did redecorate my background. I am very proud of it, and I hope you are too. Anyway, see you next time.